The wind carried dust across the courtyard as Armin stood with his arms folded, watching the preparations with a face carved from indifference. Marriage, to him, was nothing more than a transaction, an agreement signed not by love, but by obligation. His father had insisted, his mother had pleaded, and society had whispered its expectations until even a man like him could no longer ignore it. He had agreed to marry, but not out of desire, not out of hope, and certainly not out of love. He had made one condition clear: find someone simple, quiet, plain. I don't want complications. And so the search ended quickly. A girl from a modest background. No reputation for beauty. No boldness. No charm that could disturb his carefully controlled life. Just someone who would fit into his world without demanding anything from it. Or so he believed. The wedding day arrived without excitement in his heart. The house was filled with relatives, laughter, and celebration. But Armin felt detached from it all, like a man watching his own life from a distance. He wore the groom's attire, greeted guests, and followed rituals like a machine programmed to perform. And then, she arrived. Everything changed in a single moment. When the bride stepped into the hall, a hush fell. Not complete silence, but something close. Conversations faltered. Eyes turned. Even the air seemed to pause. Armin looked up casually, and then he froze. This was not the plain girl he had agreed to marry. This woman, this stranger, was breathtaking. Not just beautiful, but dangerously so. There was something in her presence that unsettled him. Her face carried a quiet strength. Her eyes held depth he couldn't immediately read, and her grace was not timid. It was composed, almost regal. This was not simplicity. This was something else entirely. Something that stirred something within him he did not want to feel. Desire. And that terrified him. He clenched his jaw as she walked closer. Her gaze lowered, her steps measured. Everyone whispered praises. How lucky he was, how stunning she looked. But Armin felt none of that joy. Instead, an unfamiliar tension gripped him. This was not what he signed up for. This woman was not safe. And Armin had built his entire life around control. During the ceremony, he avoided looking at her directly. But his eyes betrayed him. Again and again, they drifted toward her, drawn by something he couldn't explain. Her silence wasn't empty. It was filled with something powerful. Something he couldn't dominate. Something he couldn't predict. And that made him uneasy. When their eyes accidentally met for the first time, it was brief, but it was enough. There was no fear in her gaze. No submission. Just quiet awareness. As if she already understood him. That night, when the guests had left and the house finally fell into silence, Armin stood outside the room they were meant to share. His hand rested on the door, but he didn't open it immediately. For the first time in years, he hesitated. Not because of her, but because of himself. Because deep inside, something had shifted. And he didn't trust it. He finally entered. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, calm, composed, as if she had been waiting. Not nervously, but patiently. Armin spoke first, his voice cold, controlled. This marriage, it's an arrangement. Don't expect more. She looked at him, and to his surprise, she didn't react the way most would. She simply nodded. I didn't come here with expectations, she said softly. Her voice was gentle, but it carried strength. And for reasons he didn't understand, that unsettled him even more. Because he had expected weakness. And instead, he found mystery. That night, Armin lay awake long after she had fallen asleep. He stared at the ceiling, his thoughts restless, his emotions unfamiliar. He had wanted a simple life, predictable marriage. Acquis existence. But the woman sleeping beside him was anything but simple. And for the first time in a long time, Armin felt something he couldn't control. Fear. Not of her, but of what she might awaken within him. Chapter 2. The Fire Within. Days turned into weeks, but the tension inside Armin did not fade. It grew. Living with her was nothing like he expected. She did not demand attention. She did not try to impress him. She did not even question his distance. Instead, she moved through life with a quiet dignity that made him more aware of her presence than any loud behavior ever could. Her name was Ariba, and she was a contradiction he couldn't solve. She woke early, managed the house effortlessly, spoke politely to everyone, and carried herself with calm strength. But there were moments, brief, almost invisible, when Armin caught glimpses of something deeper. A sadness she never spoke about, a resilience she never explained, and a confidence that didn't seek approval. It drew him in, against his will. He began noticing things. The way her eyes softened when she spoke to his mother. The way she stood her ground, respectfully but firmly, when something was unfair. The way she never tried to win him over, yet somehow slowly she was, and that scared him. Because Armin was not a man who lost control. But this was different. One evening, everything changed. Ariba was in the courtyard, struggling with a heavy water container. A servant had failed to show up, and without complaint, she handled it herself. Armin watched from a distance. Something inside him stirred. Not desire. Not yet. Something else. Respect. Without thinking, he walked over and took the container from her. Their hands brushed, and in that brief contact, everything shifted. A spark. Sharp. Unavoidable. They both felt it. She pulled her hand back quickly, her expression calm, but her breathing slightly uneven. Armin felt it too. And this time, he couldn't ignore it. That night he couldn't sleep. His mind replayed that moment again and again. Her touch, her presence, her strength, and the way she made him feel something real, something raw, something dangerous. The next day he found himself watching her more closely, not out of suspicion, but out of curiosity. And slowly that curiosity turned into something deeper, something he had tried to avoid his entire life. Emotion, connection, desire, not just physical but emotional. And that terrified him more than anything. Because desire meant vulnerability, and vulnerability meant losing control. One evening, unable to contain it anymore, he confronted her. "Why are you like this?" he asked. She looked at him, confused. "Like what?" "So calm, so unaffected." Ariba smiled faintly. "Because I've learned that not everything needs a reaction." Her answer hit him harder than he expected. For the first time, Armin realized something. She wasn't quiet because she was weak. She was quiet because she was strong. And suddenly, he wasn't afraid of her beauty anymore. He was afraid of his own feelings. Because they were real. Because they were growing. And because for the first time in his life, he wanted something he couldn't control. That night, he stood outside their room again. Just like the first day. But this time, the hesitation wasn't fear. It was something else. Something new. Hope. He entered. She looked up. And for the first time, he didn't look away. "I was wrong," he said quietly. She didn't speak. She didn't need to. Because in that moment, everything had already changed.